I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you, because this could completely change how you see people and protect yourself from years of emotional damage. After working with thousands of people struggling with toxic relationships, I've discovered something that will shock you. There are 6 specific phrases that manipulative people use like weapons, and once you learn to recognize them, you'll never be fooled again. These phrases sound so normal, so reasonable, that most people don't realize they're being manipulated until months or even years later when the damage is already done. But today, that changes for you. By the end of this video, you'll have what I call manipulation radar, the ability to spot emotional predators before they can hurt you. Here's what most people don't understand. Manipulation isn't always obvious. It's not always screaming or name-calling or obvious abuse. The most dangerous manipulation is subtle, disguised as normal conversation, wrapped in concern or even love. It's designed to make you question yourself, doubt your reality, and slowly hand over your power without even realizing you're doing it. Before we dive into these 6 phrases, you need to understand why they work so well on good people like you. Our brains are wired to want connection, understanding, and harmony. We naturally want to give people the benefit of the doubt, to see the best in them, to believe that if we just explain ourselves better or try harder, they'll understand and treat us well. Manipulative people know this about us. They know that kind, empathetic people will often blame themselves before they blame others. They know that people with good hearts will make excuses for bad behavior. And they use this knowledge against us. Think about it this way. If someone came up to you and said, "I'm going to manipulate you now," you'd run, right? But what if they said something that made you feel like you were the problem, like you needed to fix something about yourself to make the relationship work? Most of us would stay and try harder. That's exactly how these phrases work. They flip the script, making you the problem instead of their behavior. They make you focus on fixing yourself instead of questioning why you need to be fixed at all. 1. You're too emotional, or you're overreacting. Let's start with the phrase that's probably destroyed more self-confidence than any other. You're too emotional, you're overreacting, or you're being dramatic. This phrase is like emotional poison because it targets something most of us already worry about, whether our feelings are valid or if we're just being too much. Here's what's really happening when someone says this to you. They're uncomfortable with your emotions, and instead of dealing with their own discomfort or addressing whatever made you upset, they're making your feelings the problem. It's a classic deflection move that puts you on the defensive and takes the heat off them. Let me tell you about Maria. She was dating someone who would consistently cancel their plans at the last minute, sometimes after she'd already gotten ready and was waiting for him to pick her up. When she told him how disappointed and disrespected this made her feel, he would say, "God, Maria, you're so dramatic. It's not that serious." This made Maria start questioning herself. Maybe she was being too dramatic? Maybe she should be more understanding? So she stopped expressing when his behavior hurt her. She started accepting treatment that felt wrong because she'd been convinced that her normal emotional responses were the problem. What Maria didn't realize was that her boyfriend was training her, like you'd train a dog, to stop reacting to his disrespectful behavior. Every time he dismissed her feelings, he was teaching her that her emotions didn't matter and that his comfort was more important than her dignity. Here's the truth. Someone who truly cares about you doesn't dismiss your feelings, they get curious about them. They ask questions like, "Help me understand why this upset you?" Or, "What can I do differently next time?" They don't make you feel crazy for having normal human reactions to inconsiderate behavior. Your emotions are not the enemy. They're your internal guidance system, telling you when something isn't right, when someone isn't treating you well, when a situation doesn't feel safe. When someone convinces you that your emotions are wrong or excessive, they're essentially breaking your internal compass, leaving you lost and vulnerable. 2. I'm just being honest, after being cruel. The second phrase that should make every alarm in your head go off is, I'm just being honest, or I'm just telling you the truth, especially when it follows a mean, unnecessary, or deliberately hurtful comment. This phrase is manipulation wearing a mask of virtue. It's designed to make you feel like you should be grateful for cruelty, like their meanness is actually a gift they're giving you. But here's what you need to understand. There's a huge difference between honest feedback that helps you grow and cruel comments designed to tear you down. When someone who genuinely cares about you needs to share difficult information, they do it with kindness. They choose their timing carefully. They focus on specific behaviors rather than attacking your character, and they wrap their honesty in care, not cruelty. Take James, for example. In his previous relationship, his girlfriend would make cutting remarks about his appearance, his job, his family, always followed by, I'm just being honest, I thought you'd want to know. This made James believe that love meant accepting harsh criticism and that asking for kindness was asking too much. When James met someone new, the difference was shocking. When she had feedback, it sounded completely different. I noticed you seemed really stressed after that work call. Want to talk about it? Or, I felt a little hurt when you forgot our dinner plans. Could we figure out a system to help you remember important dates? Her honesty was delivered with care, not designed to wound. People who hide behind, I'm just being honest, to justify cruelty are showing you one of two things. Either they lack empathy entirely, or they actually enjoy causing you pain and want to make it your fault for being hurt by it. Either way, that's valuable information about their character. Real honesty builds bridges and solves problems. Fake honesty, the kind that hides behind this phrase, is just cruelty trying to avoid responsibility for the damage it causes. 3. You're being controlling when you set boundaries. This might be the most psychologically damaging phrase on this list because it's designed to make you afraid of having any needs or standards at all. When someone calls you controlling for expressing your boundaries, they're training you to stop advocating for yourself in the relationship. Let me be crystal clear about what boundaries actually are. They're not controlling, they're not demands, and they're not punishments. Boundaries are simply you communicating what you need to feel safe, respected, and valued. When you say things like, I need you to call if you're going to be more than an hour late, or I'm not comfortable with how you spoke to me in front of your friends, you're not being controlling, you're being clear about your standards. Here's what happens to people who fall for this manipulation. They start shrinking their needs, accepting poor treatment, and priding themselves on being low maintenance and easygoing, not realizing that they're actually abandoning themselves to accommodate someone who doesn't value their well-being. Lisa experienced this with her ex, who would disappear for entire evenings without any communication, then call her controlling when she asked him to let her know his plans. You're so controlling, he'd say. I need my freedom. If you really loved me, you'd trust me and not need to know where I am every second. What Lisa didn't realize at first was that he was using this label to avoid basic consideration and respect. He wanted all the benefits of a committed relationship, her emotional support, her loyalty, her availability, without any of the responsibility that comes with caring about someone else's feelings. The people who call you controlling for having reasonable boundaries are often the same people who will take advantage of you if you don't have them. They want access to all of you while giving you the minimum in return. They see your needs as obstacles to their convenience rather than important information about how to love you well. 4. I don't do drama. This phrase sounds mature and reasonable on the surface, but it's often code for, I don't want to be held accountable for my actions, or, I will dismiss any legitimate concerns you have as unnecessary drama. When someone says they don't do drama, pay close attention to what they actually mean. Are they talking about avoiding petty conflicts and gossip? That's healthy. Or are they talking about avoiding any conversation where you might express that they've hurt your feelings or crossed a boundary? That's a red flag. People who genuinely don't like drama work to prevent it by communicating clearly, treating others with respect, and addressing small issues before they become big problems. People who use this phrase as a shield often create drama by ignoring problems until they explode, then blame everyone else for being dramatic. Consider what happened to David. His partner would consistently make plans with other people during their scheduled date nights. Then when David expressed frustration, she'd say, "Ugh, I don't do drama. You're being so needy and dramatic." She was labeling his reasonable request for consideration as drama to avoid taking responsibility for her inconsiderate behavior. Here's the reality: relationships require emotional labor. They require difficult conversations sometimes. They require two people who are willing to hear when they've hurt each other and make adjustments. Someone who labels all emotional processing as drama is essentially telling you they're not willing to do the work that healthy relationships require. 5. That's just how I am. This phrase is manipulation disguised as self-acceptance. When someone uses their personality, their past, or their nature as an excuse for treating you poorly, they're essentially telling you that their comfort with who they are is more important than your comfort in the relationship. That's just how I am is often followed by behaviors like chronic lateness, emotional unavailability, flirtation with others, explosive anger, or breaking promises. The message is clear: I'm not willing to grow or change, so you need to accept poor treatment if you want to be with me. This phrase is particularly dangerous because it can make you feel like you're being judgmental or trying to change someone if you express that their behavior affects you. But here's what you need to understand. Asking someone to treat you with basic respect and consideration isn't trying to change who they are, it's asking them to be a good partner. Sarah's ex used to say this whenever she brought up his habit of flirting with other women right in front of her. "That's just how I am," he'd shrug. "I'm a friendly person. If you can't handle that, maybe you're too insecure for a relationship." What he was really saying was, "I'm not willing to modify my behavior to make you feel secure and respected in this relationship. I'd rather make you feel like your needs are unreasonable than make small adjustments to show you that you matter to me." People who truly love you want to grow and evolve, especially when they realize their behavior is hurting someone they care about. They don't hide behind, "That's just how I am." They say things like, "I didn't realize that affected you that way. Let me work on that." 6. If you really loved me. This is perhaps the most manipulative phrase of all because it weaponizes your love against you. It's emotional blackmail disguised as a test of your feelings. When someone says, "If you really loved me, you would," they're essentially telling you that your love isn't real unless you prove it by doing what they want, even if it goes against your better judgment. This phrase creates what psychologists call a double bind, a situation where you can't win no matter what you choose. If you don't do what they're asking, you're proving you don't really love them. If you do comply, you're teaching them that they can manipulate you by questioning your love. This manipulation often shows up around major decisions. "If you really loved me, you'd move to another city with me. If you really loved me, you'd lend me this money even though you can't afford it. If you really loved me, you wouldn't spend time with friends I don't like." Real love doesn't require you to compromise your values, ignore your boundaries, or do things that hurt you to prove its authenticity. Someone who truly loves you would never want you to do something that damages you or goes against your conscience, even if it would make them happy. Michael learned this lesson when his girlfriend kept using this phrase to pressure him into cutting contact with his female friends, lending her money he couldn't afford to lose, and skipping family events she didn't want to attend. Each time he hesitated, she'd question his love. "If you really loved me, this wouldn't even be a question." What she was really doing was using his feelings for her as leverage to control his choices. Real love says, I love you, so I want you to make decisions that are right for you, even if they're not convenient for me. Manipulative love says, prove you love me by doing what I want, regardless of how it affects you. Here's something scary that most people don't realize. When you hear these phrases repeatedly, they actually change how your brain works. Each time someone dismisses your feelings, questions your reality, or makes you feel like your needs are unreasonable, your brain starts to believe it. You begin to second-guess your instincts. You start monitoring yourself constantly, wondering if you're being too sensitive, too dramatic, too controlling, too much. You lose touch with your own internal guidance system because you've been trained to believe it's faulty. This is why people who've been manipulated often say things like, I don't even know what I feel anymore, or, I can't tell if I'm being reasonable or not. The manipulation has literally disconnected them from their own emotional intelligence. But here's the good news. Once you recognize these patterns, you can start to heal them. You can reconnect with your intuition, rebuild your confidence in your own perceptions, and learn to trust yourself again. These phrases don't just hurt in the moment, they have long-term effects on how you see yourself and what you accept in relationships. People who've been consistently told they're too sensitive often become emotionally numb, afraid to feel or express anything that might be labeled as too much. People who've been called controlling for having boundaries often become doormats, accepting treatment that goes against their values because they're terrified of being seen as demanding. People who've been manipulated with, if you really loved me, often become people pleasers who sacrifice their own well-being to prove their love. The most heartbreaking part is that these tactics work by turning your greatest strengths against you. Your empathy becomes a way for others to make you feel guilty. Your desire for harmony becomes a way to silence your legitimate concerns. Your capacity for love becomes a tool to manipulate your choices. Now that you know what to listen for, here's how to protect yourself when you hear these phrases. When someone says you're being too sensitive or overreacting, respond with, my feelings are giving me important information, and I need them to be respected. Don't explain why you have the right to feel what you're feeling. You don't need anyone's permission to have emotions. When someone hides behind, I'm just being honest, after being cruel, you can say, honesty without kindness is just cruelty with an excuse. Or simply, you can tell me the truth and still be respectful. When someone calls you controlling for having boundaries, respond with, these aren't controlling behaviors, they're my standards for how I want to be treated. Don't argue about whether your boundaries are reasonable. If they matter to you, they're reasonable. When someone dismisses your concerns as drama, say, this is important to me, and I need us to address it. Don't let them make you feel bad for caring about things that affect you. When someone uses, that's just how I am, to excuse poor behavior, respond with, that's fine, and this is how I am, someone who needs to be treated with respect. When someone tries to manipulate you with, if you really loved me, say, my love for you isn't measured by my willingness to do things that don't feel right to me. So what does healthy communication actually sound like? Here are some examples. Instead of, you're being too sensitive, a caring person says, I can see this really affected you. Help me understand what happened. Instead of, I'm just being honest, after cruelty, they say, I have some feedback that might be hard to hear. When would be a good time to talk about it? Instead of calling you controlling, they say, it sounds like this is really important to you. Let's figure out how to make this work for both of us. Instead of dismissing concerns as drama, they say, I can see you're upset. What can we do to fix this? Instead of, that's just how I am, they say, I didn't realize that was affecting you. Let me think about how I can do better. Instead of, if you really loved me, they say, I'd love it if you could do this, but I understand if it doesn't work for you. Here's the most important thing I want you to remember. Your emotional reactions are data. They're your internal alarm system telling you when something isn't right. When someone consistently makes you feel confused, diminished, or like you're walking on eggshells, that's valuable information about their character and the dynamic they're creating. Stop trying to convince yourself that manipulative behavior is normal or that you should be more understanding. Stop making excuses for people who make you feel bad about having normal human needs and emotions. Your job isn't to be so accommodating that you lose yourself in the process. Your job is to honor your own needs, trust your instincts, and create relationships where you feel safe to be authentically yourself. The right people for you won't use these phrases because they understand that love is about creating safety, not testing limits. They won't dismiss your emotions because they recognize them as important information about your experience. They won't label your boundaries as controlling because they understand that boundaries create the safety necessary for true intimacy. These people exist, but you'll never attract them if you're busy trying to make toxic people treat you well. You'll never recognize them if you're convinced that manipulation is normal and that your needs are too much. Remember, you deserve relationships where your emotions are honored, your boundaries are respected, and your love isn't used as a tool to manipulate your choices. Don't settle for less than that, no matter how normal these manipulative phrases might seem. The moment you start honoring your own worth is the moment you stop accepting treatment that diminishes it. Trust yourself. You know more than you think you do.